So here you can see on our Trello site, I set up the site using the blog recipe, and I have just enabled the Audit module. And after, if you have enabled the Audit module, you will find a new option here, surprisingly called Audit. And if you navigate here, you will see a table that will contain the recorded events in the Audit, but for now it's empty. So let's put some data here. So let's say I would like to edit the existing blog post in the blog recipe. For example, let's say I would like to edit the title of my blog post, and I'm going to publish this new one. And after, if I navigate back to Audit, I'm going to see two new recorded events. First one is telling me that a new blog post has been saved, and the second one is about a new blog post has been published. And here you can see a version that says this is the second version of the blog post, because the first version has been created when I am installed the site. And when I install the site, the Audit module hasn't been enabled, so Audit cannot record that version. The reason why we saw two records here is that because when we click on the publish button, first Orchard core saves the new version. After that, it publishes the new one. You can see that every event can have a category, every event can have user. You can say that I wanna log the client IP address or not. You can see the timestamp when the event has occurred, and a summary which can be customizable. So you can say that for your content event, which could be saved or published, I wanna show a different kind of summary here. And as you can see, the version and the display text of the given content item is clickable. So let's say I click on the version 2, and if I do that, I'm going to see a read-only editor of a content item, and that editor contains the values of the properties which is saved when I published the second version of this blog post. So here you can see that state of the content item as you would do when you use the Audit module in Orchard 1 as well. So let's say I'm gonna edit my blog post again and change something here. So this is a change text. Let's publish it again. And if I navigate back here, now you can see I have a new version 3 here. But if I would like to see the version 2, there is no change text because it's about showing me the second version of the blog post. But if I click on the version 3, I can see that the change text appears at the markdown body editor here. So this is about showing you the later and the current version of the given content item. And you can also see the details in here. Let's say I would like to see the details of these saved events. So if I click on the details, I will see some basic data like the name of the event, the category, timestamp, username, content item ID, etc., etc. And here comes a bigger table which shows me the diff between the event that I am just viewing and between the later content item. So here you can see that I changed something in the markdown of the markdown body part, which is attached to a blog post content type. And here I added this change text, and the editor showed me this with green. It means it's an addition. But if we see the change in the content item version ID, you can see that this was the content item version ID of the previous blog post, and now it gets a new one with this one. You can see the modified UTC has been changed. You can see because it's a saved event, in this case, the value of the published is changed from true to false. And here you can see two different kind of switches. First one is default enabled. It's called show diff. It means you can see the content of this diff column, but you can say, I would like to see the before and after columns as well. So if I do this, you can have new columns where you can see the previous state and the current state of the given columns. It's quite hard to see here the change because the markdown body has quite a lot of content here, but you can clearly see the changes between the modified UTC and the published values as well. And of course, if you would like to use this one, not for the diff one, you can just simply say, I would like to see only this view. Seeing the diff view could be great because it shows something similar when you do a push to a Git version control system, and you can see the changes here as you could see in a Git-based system. Another thing that could be interesting when you are using Audit Trail is if you see the table, you can see restore URL here, not just the details one. Restore is about restoring given content item to this state and creating a new draft version of it. So let's say I would like to restore the state of the blog post to this one. So this one hasn't contained the changed text, and this one has the change. So let's say I would like to restore my blog post to this state. Yes, I would like to restore to version 2. If I say yes and navigate back to blog, you can see that here is a draft blog post, and this draft blog post has only this line here without the changed text. I can say, oh, it's great, I can publish this one, and if I publish this one, the Audit Trail table will show that this blog post was restored at version 4, and I saved the version 4, and after I published the version 4 of that blog post. Here in the table, you can see some default filters. That's also inspired by the Audit Trail module, and I think that was written by Sipka in Untitled 1. You can filter by categories. We have now 2 categories, the content item categories and the user categories. To see what are user categories, let's say I'm gonna log off and I'm gonna log in as admin again, but I'm gonna mistype the password, so I will get an invalid login attempt. But after I log in successfully and navigate back to Audit Trail, I will see the 2 events. That means the admin user has failed login at that time, and after an admin user has a successful login at that time. As you can see here, we have a comment column here, which is about you can write some text, then you would like to save or publish a new version of a given content item. To use the comment column, you have to attach the audit trail part to your content type. So let's see how you can do that. So let's say I'm gonna navigate to the content definition of the page. And I click on the add parts and I will attach the audit trail one. And I hit save. So let's create a new page. And if you create a new page, you will see that new editor here called comment. So let's say the page will be, the title will be new page, and the comment will be new creating new page. Publish. Go back to the trail, and you will see that I create the version 1 of my new page with that comment, and after I published the version 1 of my new page using the same comment. So this is about how you can use the audit trail table in a nutshell, but that's not all for now. If you navigate to configuration settings, you will see a new one called audit trail, and under that you will have quite a lot of options where you can say what kind of event you would like to enable or disable when you are recording different kind of events. You can see all of the content item events here listed, and you can see the supported user events: sign up, logged in, login failed, enable, created, deleted, etc., etc. And here you can say, I would like to enable the client IP address logging. And here you can see a button called Set Blacklisted Content Types. Here you can see a new modal window that contains all the available content types in your system. So you can say, I don't want to log the changes of the article content type. I don't want to log the changes of the page content type, etc., etc. So in that case, you can restrict what kind of content type changes you would like to log. There's also a trimming settings, but you can say I would like to disable or enable trimmings. It's enabled by default, and here you can see a period. So in that case, we will keep the audit data for 10 days. So after 10 days, this background task is just about to delete every audit trail logs which are older than 10 days. So if you don't want to keep audit trail data forever, you can use trimming. But if you would like to keep the changes in the system, you can say, I would like to disable audit trail trimming. And here you can see the last time when this trimming was do the work. One more thing that I haven't shown you yet is that about you can restore your content item after you delete it, because every content item deletion in OChartPort core is actually a soft delete, so it will still remain in the database, but the audit trail log is also contains the schema of the content item, so audit trail will represent you the new content item based on the data that is saved in the audit trail event. So let's navigate back to content items and try to delete my new page. And navigate back to the audit trail data table. And here you can see that the new page was removed. So let's say I would like to restore my page. I will click on restore, and yes, I'm sure I would like to restore this content item. And if I navigate back to content items, I will see the new page as a draft. And here you can see the title, permalink, and everything which I have been just added. But of course, I can add here multiple widgets if I would like to. And handling widgets and handling these kind of changes is a thing that I would like to show you and discuss with you. Because if I say I would like to add, for example, a new row HTML, and I say for row HTML widget, and hit publish. After that, you can see that I restored my new page as version 2. I saved this as version 2, and I published this as version 2. But if I navigate to the details, you can see this kind of diff. That's because when you work with Flowpart contains a JSON inside the widgets. So in that case, the diff would be, how can I say, a little bit not too nice to see and not too nice to work with. To create a little bit bigger diff, let's say I add another row HTML widget here. I hit publish. Again, see the detail of the saved event of the version of the version 3 for now, and you can see that the modified UTC of the previous row HTML widget has been changed, and you can see that here is the JSON of the new row HTML widget. Yeah, and as I mentioned, you can filter content item events. I would like to see just the user events, or I would like to see just the content item events. I can use sort if I would like to do. In that case, yes, created, published, remove, restored. There's also a pagination that you can use to find your audit trail log. And of course, you can search for the user. So if I say admin, I will not find anything. But if I type admin, audit trail will list me all of the data, because everything which I have just did, I did with the admin user. Yes, so it's the first version of Audit Trail. The Audit Trail module in Orchard 1 has a lot more features and functions, and it's planned to add those functionality to Audit Trail in a later phase. But first, I would like to do and implement the basics of this module, and after you say that the code will be great, or will be good to match to that, after I think I can add another providers and everything to this list. And about how to extend our trail, and how to add new providers and how to add new filters, I created a documentation which is in progress. But here you can read about the usage of the audit trail table. You can find some samples and some details about the given providers that you can use. You can read about how to add filters here. So for example, how can you add the filter to filter events that is happened with, for example, with the page or the blog post content types. So add the filter here to filter events by content type, and so on and so on. And you have the possibility to display additional columns, because as in the way I have just created the filters in Audit Trail, I have created an extension point where you can add your own column, and in your own column you can also display your own value. For example, in this little example, you can just add the ID of the given Audit Trail event entity. It's a silly example, but it shows how you can implement those providers to use it, and so on and so on. So I'm gonna add some screens to the README file, and I'm gonna push it soon to the pull request of the Audit Trail module. So I think that's it for now in a nutshell about the Audit Trail module.
Thank you very much. So I took some notes while you were demoing, and but I want to give you the feedback right now, because I assume you will. It's recorded and you will share it on the Lombic demos. So that's good. And I want to give time to Dean to show the things. If we have time, I go back to the comments, to my comments at least, and because I want to see the other demos. Otherwise, we can do it offline. But does anyone have questions, comments, as long as it doesn't take more than 10 minutes, because we want time after?
Soteris has 2 in the chat.
Okay, sorry. So Soteris, I'm reading your questions. A great demo. 2 question IDs. Does compare works for older versions of content item and not only for previous one? Interesting. So ideally, you would be able to check 2 versions and say compare.
Yes, in WordPress there is a timeline slider where you can slide the 2 coded items to different versions. So,
that makes sense. Because when you have to see everything that changed from today since a month ago, for instance, you have to pick 2 different versions and not just iterate over all the versions. You want to see all the changes in one place. I see.
Yep.
Interesting. It would be nice to have an issue, or is there? Yeah, maybe on the Audit Trail issue to provide some feedback. Like if you can take some screenshots of what you mentioned for IDs, that might be interesting.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
And you say, so you mentioned blacklist level to blocklist. I was noting, I would say, not that. What was my recommendation to use? 1 second. Ignored content types instead of blacklisted content types. And then maybe I was also wondering, why not the opposite? Actually, just mention what types you want to track instead of disabling some types. I'm not sure which one is better. If there is, I would maybe have just checked everything, and then you can uncheck what you don't want to track, because you don't want to. I don't know.
Yeah, it would be quite nice to have an include option, because there's a lot of content types there that probably won't be used in primary content items. There's a lot of kind of flow parts and what have you that, so sometimes it might be easier to include rather than
opt-in or opt-out. Yeah.
You know,
semantically, for
minor.
me, it looks better to opt in and then maybe have an option to say automatically opt in for new types, and then they will be added automatically when a new type is created. I don't know. That seems weird to just say ignore this type instead. I don't know.
If you enable the audit trail module by default, it will logs every event, and by default it logs every content type changes. And if you say I don't want to see the changes of that content type, or I don't want to see the cloned events, you can say disable that event, or you can say I'm not care about the blog post changes. I think it's better to have a blacklist instead of a whitelist.
But or you could have the checkbox in the content type definition checked by default, and then users can, when they create a type, they can say I don't want that, or when they create, you know, like it's, I don't know, just feedback. We'll see what people say.
I see.
Just to make it more consistent, the way thing. But that's a way. I mean, that's a valid way too. Anything else? I have 20 lines on my question/comments notepad, so I don't worry. That's normal. When you have lots of features to show, there are lots of comments.
It's a quite huge PR.
Anything else from anyone?
Antoine asked whether we can filter on filter or events for a specific content item.
Oh, specific content. What do you say? I didn't see that. Oh, can we filter on the events on one specific content item? In my notes, I wanted content types, like show me all the changes for blog posts. I didn't think about content item, but it might make sense, like to filter on a specific content item. It might not be good. Yes. Oh, yeah. That should be in the content item list. No, not here. Go to content items. What Antoine means is when you go to the content items list here, you need an action on the right to say, show me the history. On a specific content item, you see actions, the actions button.
Yes. In Orchard 1, you have the ability to see the given content item changes here. Okay. So if you open the editor of a given content item, here you saw a quite similar table when you visit.
But forget about
audit here, but it's just about showing you the changes of the given content item.
Forget about Orchard 1, think Orchard Core. And in the content items list, an action, a button to go to the audit trail page that is already filtered for this content item. You see actions here, there are 6 buttons action here. A button called versions or history. And when you click history, it links to your audit trail page with a query string with a content item ID, and you just display the history for this content item. That's what you want. Antoine, do you agree? That's what you want? That's what people want. I mean,
yes.
Exactly. And then you can see the history and you can restore. So it's very easy for you because you just have to query this content item and show this in your table. And then, so that's what you want. It's just a link and a filter on your, you don't have to provide it as a filter in your filter tab. You just have to handle it in the URL to filter a content item. And then the link is from the content items list. That's where people are when they want to see the history of their content item. So good idea. I just thought about
it should be super easy as well, because that drop-down list is zoned and extendable now, so you can just add to it easily.
Antoine will provide a PR to your PR. But people have requested for that, and every time they requested for that, we said it will be included in the audit trail. When we have the audit trail, we'll have that. So good comment. Okay, so I'll talk to you offline with all my comments, or we can talk another when we have time later next week, or or during a triage if you join. I have lots of questions and comments. Invite Zoltan also if you want to have someone to side by you and explain why it's this way.
Just one more thing about when you are creating a new deployment plan, you will have the availability to add a new deployment step.
Yes.
To
audit trail.
To export the audit trail settings and the audit trail trimming settings, thanks to Antoine UPR.
But why not? That's good. But I was expecting to see the audit trail itself, to be able to export the audit trail. That would be interesting. Does it make sense? Maybe that doesn't make sense, but I will see like a way.
Export the audit trail events, or what do you mean?
Yeah, not as a way to restore it somewhere, but as a way to make a copy of the audit trail, like for legal reasons, or to be able, to manipulate it externally. You see, just for data export, not just for importing it somewhere else. I don't think it makes sense. It might, but I don't care. At least to be able to export the audit trail itself. So let's use the deployment steps to do that, because that's reusable, instead of having a custom CSV export or whatever. But that might be something else you want. But that must be super useful to be able to export the audit trail with all the data you want, with the options to include the client IP, for instance, or not, the same way you record it, just because maybe legally you might want to have to do some outputs like this before you trim, for instance. Might be super useful.
Yeah, that will be a huge JSON file, but
well, not your problem. Provide the way. It's not your issue. I mean, exporting all the content items will be a huge JSON file, and in the end, what happens is that it's not a JSON file, unless you say so. It's a zip file containing all the JSON that will be downloaded, like stream from a file. So that's how it works. So not your problem. Provide a way. That should be super easy.
Okay.
Just a comment. I will add it to my notepad. Export audit trail. Feedback. Doesn't have to be done right now. It's just IDs and stuff we might need later.
Okay. One more question. Does it support localization?
It has to. It's just a localized content, you mean? It's just a content item version. So
yeah.
Maybe interesting would be to be able to filter by culture. But yeah, that should work out of the box, right?
Yes, that should work out of the box, and you can also add a new filter here to filter by a given culture. So I think it's also doable.
And if you have the content item filter from the content items, that's even good, even better, because when you will list the history of a content item, it will be just of this localization, because it's a content item is a localized version, is a localized content item. So each localization of content item is a different content item. So it will be nice in the UI also. Okay, thank you, Gabor. I want to see other demos and other topics. So let's give the screen to Dean to see some updates on the shortcode. Thanks a lot.